Horror and being scared are purely subjective, granted. What might make gamers shriek like a banshee in some cases may barely get an eyebrow raise from another gamer, so naturally it's hard to quantify it. What we can do, however, is all agree on there being quite a few absolutely terrifying opening scenes to horror games, whether it be the outright and immediate bells and whistles type or the looming slow build of terror. And bear in mind, there will be some graphic descriptions in here, you've been warned. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 terrifying horror video game openings. Number 10. Song of Horror. Song of Horror, a fixed camera, once episodically released title, could initially be spurned as just another homage to what came before. Get past that initial skepticism mind, and there's a truly terrifying tale to get through here, which it does by starting with one of the most effective slow build prologues in recent years. Our temporary protagonist Daniel is not a hard-boiled detective. He's a publisher. So when he goes out of the house of presumed missing author Sebastian P. Huscher, he's naturally curious when the lights are out, as he should be. There are strange machinations going on at the house of Huscher, spooky, otherworldly goings-on that mess with both the lights and the players' heads. There's a looming presence in there with you, presence being capitalized because that's its name, brought on by Huscher's curiosity with a mysterious box. As such, Daniel's prologue is fraught with terrifying moments. It's set in 1998, so there's no mod cons or mobiles to call for backup on, just the player, dim light, and some very nasty things that go bump in the dark. Number 9. Forbidden Siren. Forbidden Siren, Japan Studios' early 2000s horror title, sets to ape J-horror movies like The Ring and The Grudge. These were booming worldwide, so it was only natural that a game would follow suit. The small fictional countryside town of Hanuta has been subjected to some kind of natural disaster, but instead of relief aid and rebuilding, the townsfolk are subjected to something causing them to become hive-minded, bleed from the eyes, and become seemingly invulnerable. Which isn't a great start for our revolving door of playable characters who are armed with very little and have to survive. Right from the off, the Shibito, the undead villagers, are after you, barely giving you any time to collect your thoughts. Whilst players can use their hive mind vision trick to see where the Shibito are, it's not always a blessing. There is nothing more terrifying in this video game, or I would argue most horror games, than sight jacking. Their words, not ours, to see where the enemies are, only to spot the back of your head as one sneaks up on you. It may look dated now, but back in 2004, this was a revolutionary way of terrifying players so early on. Number 8. The Last of Us. One could argue about whether The Last of Us is a survival horror, an action-adventure, or just Uncharted with zombies and crafting. What isn't up for debate, mind, is how unnerving the opening scene is. It starts off idyllic, with single dad Joel returning home for an evening with his daughter, which is soon ruined by the sudden and overwhelming outbreak of the cordyceps virus wreaking havoc on the USA. Whilst it sounds rote, what makes this terrifying is that there's no slow build. There's no intervening news or radio broadcasts giving players time to warm up and prepare for the carnage. Just Joel, his brother Tommy, and daughter Sarah, fleeing in the middle of the night as not zombies tear the town apart. Cars crashing, buildings on fire, your friendly neighbors being munched on by fungal lunatics. And then, the most terrifying moment a parent has to witness, Joel's daughter shot in his arms. It's teeth-clenching, it's terrifying, and it's only the first 20 minutes of the apocalypse. Number 7. The Evil Within. Shinji Mikami wasn't lying when he said he wanted to make something new that carries on the terror of Resident Evils that he's worked on. But instead of angry European locals like in Resi 4, Detective Sebastian Castellanos has something else to deal with. Not the murder investigation that he thinks he's going to, no. Something much, much worse. Granted, there's definitely a murder, but that's the least of Sebastian's worries, as there's a robed man with a patchwork quilt for a face doing some very awful, seemingly impossible things. It doesn't end there though, as the detective finds himself fleeing a chainsaw-wielding man-mountain through a labyrinthine area of a basement. What starts off as paranormal and tension building quickly descends into high-octane levels of madness. While the game does fall into standard over-the-shoulder shooter territory not long after, that opening half hour or so is absolutely terrifying. Number 6. Visage. Set in the 80s, Visage starts its first-person horror with a gun-based murder-suicide. That alone is terrifying to sit and watch a family be murdered, but it doesn't end there. After that initial bang, bad taste pun intended by this author, Visage is just getting warmed up. What follows, even as part of its opening hour, are some of the tensest moments in horror gaming. Visage likes to mess with lights, and by extension, the player's sanity. The darkness will cause you to panic and die over time, but that's not all. Aside from the random jump scares, which are really good at catching players out, there's also murderous spirits abound. These don't catch you in standard fashion mind, that'd be far too easy. Players are used to that cliche by now. Instead, those spirits are tangible, and apropos of nothing, you'll be caught and stabbed in the gut by a ghostly granny. That's not even a wacky exaggeration. Visage will literally conjure a murdering ghost old lady, amongst others, if you dally too long. It sets the scene for one of gaming's most terrifying haunted house adventures. Trust me. Number 5. Resident Evil 2. It could have been easy to populate this list with several Resident Evils, with Leon's solo outing in 4 almost getting it. But whilst that built up into something tense eventually, it's his debut that takes this spot. While he was a bit more savvy in 4, both he and Claire Redfield had no idea what they were about to face back in 1998. Neither did the players, as Resi 2 dropped them straight into the deep end. After witnessing either character's intro FMV, Capcom decided the best way to get stuck into their sophomore title was to start your chosen avatar in trouble. Rather than the first game's initial detective work, Claire or Leon are put within a few feet of several zombies, which can and will give players a very quick game over if they don't cotton on. It was terrifying to the unsuspecting, as you quite literally hit the ground running. Zombies may be slow, but they're relentless. They will catch up to gamers if they don't keep ahead or find a doorway loading screen. Does the game ease up after that? Not for a while, that's for sure. Number 4. Silent Hill. The psychological yang to Resident Evil's more action-oriented yin, Silent Hill is nonetheless regarded with high esteem. Yet whilst Capcom's sequel goes for bombastic, Konami's debut series title goes for the insidious build instead. Terror already sets in when players are put in control of Harry Mason looking for his daughter. Running through foggy streets is enough to set the dread in, parent or otherwise. But wait, there's more as things take a darker turn. Quite literally, as Harry is sequestered through some narrow back alleys. Getting darker and darker, Harry is confronted with the gruesome sight of a dismembered corpse, and then has to succumb to small demonic beasts killing him. And you think that'd be enough to put the fear in players, but no, Silent Hill isn't done yet. After meeting the only alive-looking person so far, Harry is left in the relative safety of an empty diner. Lulled into a false sense of security, the terror is put right back into the forefront when a winged whatever shatters that calm. And the window. The town may be silent, but our heartbeats were not. Number 3. Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation, one of this author's favorite games, set out to capture the magic that Ridley Scott subjected us to in 1979. From the set design and retro aesthetic to the score, even the continuity from the film. It also followed the same precedent of terrifying build-up that brought to the screen. Boarding the seemingly derelict Sevastopol station, the sense of looming dread is overwhelming. Things go bump and scuttle, bits of masonry rattle and clank that would suggest there's something sneaking up behind you. But then it lulls players into a false sense of terror before really dropping things behind them, or in front, or talking in a calm synthetic voice before smashing Ripley's brains into a partition. Granted, it's not immediate terror, but Isolation builds that tension from the get-go, that even the first few chapters feel like one long tension-filled opening. Number 2. Dead Space 2. Much like Capcom's earlier offering and Isolation's opener, the first game offered a slow build as Isaac Clarke takes in the Ishimura, which is good as far as setting the scene goes, but as is the fashion for sequels, stakes need to be raised, tensions need building, and gamers need something to get them full of fear and adrenaline. Clarke bound to a chair? Check. Sirens blazing and all hell breaking loose? Check. What do we need to ramp up the blood pressure? Ah yes, Isaac's erstwhile rescuer's face exploding before our eyes. I don't mean a Scanners-esque don't pop. No, we're talking the Thing levels of flesh stripping, shrieks of pain, and that helpless feeling of being bound to a chair whilst impending doom is transforming before our very eyes. It not only sets the scene, but the tone for the game itself. The necromorphs are here, they are literally in your face, and they will mess you up. Also, don't stop running. Number 1. Outlast 2. The first Outlast was rightly so met with high acclaim on its release. In an era of popular walking simulator horror games, Miles Upshur's journey into Mount Massive Asylum was understandably terrifying. But as is the nature with sequels, stakes have to be raised. Get past the overused helicopter crash beginning oft seen in action games, Outlast 2 quickly remembers it's a horror game. Cameraman Blake is confronted with a missing wife and a skinned pilot. If only that were the worst of it. A weird, I don't remember this bit in the Bible, rural America vibe going on, fanatical villagers, corpse piles of both adults and infants, signs of torture and sacrifice, that and Blake's visions of the past that hold something deep and dark to reveal later on. It's unrelenting to say the least, and as Blake is only armed with a camera and a supply of evidently cheap batteries, hiding is the name of the game, which isn't easy when those villagers can seemingly smell fear. It doesn't get any easier as it sets the tone for what to expect through the rest of this grim tale. That is the end of our horrifying list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other terrifying horror video game openings that would be right at home here. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can go follow me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.